Hello everyone, and welcome to a Unity tutorial on dust particle effects, animated particle effects using Amplify Shader, and you can also use the shader graph, very much the same. And let's get started. I'll show you a little preview about what it's going to look like here. So you can use this in any way you want. I have it as, a player is kind of surrounding a player and coming outwards from where a player would be. But you can use this as a trail or as something hitting the ground. Or, there's many different ways to use this. So that's the preview, and let's get started and actually make this thing. Okay, so I've got a brand new project open up here, brand new scene. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the particle effect that we can start playing with, and then we will make the shader to go along with it. So I'm just going to create a new particle system. And obviously we don't want it to be anything like this, but we'll edit it a bit here. Oops, I'll call it dust particles. We'll set the duration to maybe, let's say like 3. We'll have it loop. Just make sure it's playing again here. And if it's not playing, that's because I'm in game mode. So let's hit play on the preview here. We'll see it play. I'm just going to do a couple things here. I'm going to turn off, let's get rid of the selection outline. Okay, so we've got dust particles here. First of all, we want them to kind of start in the middle and spread outwards. So let's change the shape of this effect. Let's go to I think we want a circle, like that. And the radius we can play with later, not worried about that. The radius thickness, let's put that to, actually let's leave that at 0 for now. The arc is fine, spread is fine. Yeah, we don't want that. Mess with any of that. This is probably okay for now. One thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to go to Emission. I'm going to go 0 for rate over time. And I'm going to instead add a burst. So that's going to give us this type of effect. And I'll leave it at 30 for the count, which I think is a good number. So now, there's a few things we want to do. We want to change the velocity over time. And you can also do limit velocity over time, but I feel like velocity over time gives us a little more control, and we can do a nice speed modifier curve over time. So I will leave it at 1 at the start, and maybe what we'll do is near the end, but we don't want it to go negative. We want it to stay, so this line right here is 0. So we'll stay at about here. And we want to go a little earlier even. Something like that. I mean, we can play with this later, but we'll leave it at that for now. Okay, and then the other thing we want to do is we want to do size over lifetime. And that's not really to my liking. Let's try something like this. It's a little better. We'll probably want to go get big a little quicker though. That's good for now. Again, we'll play with it. And then we want color over lifetime. We're actually going to do a couple things with color over lifetime. We're going to use vertex data in our shader, but that might be something we get to a little later. So I'm going to leave that for now, and we'll come back to this. Let's make our shader. So first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to go into this folder here. I just have a folder just for this project, and I am going to make a new material. I'm going to call it dust particle material, just for the sake of this tutorial. I'm going to go back to my dust particles, and under the renderer tab here, I'm going to drag that material to here. And it's going to look like garbage right now, obviously. That's okay. We're going to change that. Save the scene. So now I'm going to make a shader. And I'm actually going to just leave it in this folder. I usually have a separate folder for all my shaders, but just for this tutorial, I will do this. So I'm going to open up Amplify Shader, open up a new canvas. And it opened up on my other screen, so that's not what we want. And I think what I'll actually do, this is viewable, but I'm going to leave it here so we can see the scene view as well. I think that's fine. There's a couple things we need to set on this shader before we save it. We want it surface. Light mode though, we want it unlit, right? Because what I showed you in the preview, it's more of like a cartoon effect. It'll have an outline. We're actually going to create the outline ourselves. The shader isn't going to do that for us. Well, I mean, we're going to do it within the shader, but we're not going to use like an outline node or anything like that. Because it's a 2D flat surface, and for an outline node to work, you need a 3D model. So we're going to make it transparent, just like that, and we'll give it a name. Let's just call it, we'll give it a folder called tutorials, and we'll call it dust particle. Okay, then we'll save it right here. Dust particles. Oh, it changes this. I like to separate my shaders into folders. That way, when you're looking at them in the inspector, they're a lot easier to see. So, now we have our shader and we have our material. So let's click on our material and use the shader drop down here. We'll actually make the shader use. So we have this tutorial folder here. We'll actually make it use the correct shader. And as you can see, the materials turn black because we don't actually have anything going on in this shader yet. That's fine. We'll get there in a second. So now we just have to start making the shader. You know, this is kind of the difficult part. There's actually quite a bit to this shader, but it's all fairly, it's fairly grouped in sections. Like, first we're going to get a padding texture. So maybe we'll set that up first. It's really simple to do. And then we will go ahead and create, well, you'll see. It's good. We'll get there. So first thing we're going to do is create a padding texture. So I'm just going to go off in the distance somewhere and just do this, and we'll section it off. It'll be its own thing. So I'm going to create a texture object. Okay. Okay, so I've went and I've grabbed a texture called Bubbly that I made a long time ago in Substance Designer, and I'm going to use that in this tutorial, and I will also include it somehow for everyone else to use. It is a great texture. I use it a lot. So I'm going to select it here. It's called Bubbly, and you can see it's bubbly. It's really just, well, I mean, it looks like bubbles, right? Okay, so we have to do two things here. We want two padding textures. So let's get a texture object, okay, which actually uses this texture that we have. Oops, that's not the right one. Texture sample is what I meant. Okay, we're going to do this, and we're actually going to make two of them. And I'll show you why in a few seconds, why we need two. And then we also need a UV coordinates, or texture coordinates, sorry. Okay, and I'll actually, well, yeah, I'll double that up, and I'll show you why as well. And we need a panner. Okay, and we just plug the texture coordinates into the panner and the panner into the texture input, and we'll do the same thing below. The reason we have two texture coordinates instead of just plugging them into here is because we actually want to use different values in both of these nodes. Okay, and then what we're going to do here is we are going to add these together. Well, we might multiply them. We'll see. We'll see what the better effect is. And we just want the R value. And that essentially gives us the black and white value. It's not exactly black and white, but it's close. Okay, And then we are going to, well, we got quite a bit to do here, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to register a variable here. I'm just going to plug this in. And if you've never used variables in Amplify Shader before, you should start now because they're amazing. And essentially, this will just let us give this a name. So let's just call this panning texture. Okay, and then what we can do is anywhere else on our node canvas, we can make a get variable, and we can choose panning texture, and that output will be able to use. And you can see if you click on them, they highlight. So it is a very, very, very good thing. So we should probably get these panning a little bit. Let's put this to like 0.1 or something. And I have this weird bug where in Amplify the nodes don't show up correctly. If I hit play, they do. So I'm not sure what's up with that. So just try to ignore that. It hopefully won't look like this on yours. And let's make this one negative 0.1. Let's get them panning against each other. Let's give this one a little bit of an upward pan as well, or downward pan. And maybe this one will do a little bit upwards, minus negative 0.1. Negative 0.02, we'll say, just a little bit of an upward. And then when these add together, we're going to do some magic here in a sec. So this is essentially the start of our, well, this is the texture that is going to be flattened and kind of masked, and we're going to get some transparency out of this, and it's all just a bunch of magic that's going to happen right away. It's going to be pretty cool. All right, so what do we have to do next now? We have to do a few things. The first thing we're going to do, well, maybe not the first thing. Maybe, yeah, you know what? I think that's a good idea. So let's just go ahead and we'll plug this into Emission. And remember, that's the variable we made here. I'm just gonna refresh that. It'll just look white for now. And part of that reason is we actually have to go into this material and assign that bubbly texture again. Okay, so we have this now. Not looking like much yet. So maybe the first thing we should focus on is opacity. I mean, there's a lot of things we could focus on, but let's go with opacity. There's some cool things we need to do for the opacity here, and it will really help us kind of grasp what is happening. So we have this texture. We know that. We're going to get that over here. We can leave it plugged in over there too. You can use this variable as many times as you want. So panning texture, we will go ahead and grab that, and we're going to do a few things with it. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and create a mask. That's the best way to explain this. We're going to create a circle mask. So if you've never made a circle in math before, it's pretty easy. So we're just going to use the texture coordinates. Then we're going to remap it. There's also an actual node called ellipse. I'll show you. But I don't want this. I don't want this. I mean, I could probably just use this, but I'd rather show you how to make one yourself. So we go length. So we got texture coordinates, and then we want to remap that. So we're going to remap that to 0, 0, 1, 1, and then we're going to go -1 on the min new, -1, and then -1 on the y, and then 1 and 1. So just like that. And then we're going to plug that into length, and that is going to give us this, which, I mean, that's useful on its own. But for our purposes, we're going to put a 1 minus right after that, and that is going to give us this, which is essentially it looks like a 3D sphere, right? So it has fall off towards the edges. So we are going to go ahead and we are going to multiply this Okay, and then we get a little bit of a mask there. So what we'll do is we will make another variable. We're going to plug this in here. And then we will use another getter. And we will, we need to give this a name. Let's call it, opacity. And then we'll get opacity, and we'll plug it into opacity. Okay, and now we have this, which there's a few reasons why this looks wonky. But the biggest reason is that we need to clamp it. So if we put a clamp in front of here, there we go. So we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere. Now there's a lot more we have to do here, and it pretty much is all in this area. So I'm going to spread this stuff out a bit. I'm just going to put the variable registry right over there. I'm going to leave this clamp over here, and we're going to play with this a bit. This actually, I might get out of the way. I'm going to kind of clean as we go here. So I'm going to register another variable here. And I'm going to just call this, I'll just call it sphere. Doesn't really matter what it's called. And we'll just get this. And we will get sphere and plug it into here. The reason we want that is because we might want to use this in other places. So I'm just going to make it its own group. And we'll just put it way off to the side here. We can just get this variable at any point. And now everything's a lot cleaner. Perfect. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some remapping. And we are going to get this looking like cartoon smoke. And remember that bug I told you about? I'm just going to actually, fix it for a sec right here because I'd like to see the node previews. So if I just push play and then stop it, my node previews are back to normal. I don't know what's happening with that, but okay. So let's go ahead and we'll do a remap node. Remap. And we're going to remap this, and the purpose of this remap node, I'll show you in a sec. We're going to remap and then clamp, and then we're going to floor. And what floor does is it takes everything below 1 and makes it 0, and takes everything above 1 and makes it 1. So as you can see, we do have a little bit of stuff coming through here already. So that means that this texture is actually, well, because we're adding them together, right? That makes sense. We're adding these two textures together, so there's values that are above 1 in there. And that's what's coming through on the floor. So what we'll do here is we'll remap this to say, you don't have to go that far. Let's say 6. Yeah, we'll say 6 for now. Okay, and that gives us this kind of cool look. So now if we plug that in to our clamp at the end here, and we refresh, and I play the particles, we can see that we've got kind of a more hard edge, right? So that's cool. We're getting there. The texture still looks weird because what we're actually plugging into Emission is this, which we don't really want anymore. We can actually plug this into Emission and it'll probably look a little better. Not better, but closer to what we want. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's go ahead and, well, there's a bunch of stuff we got to do. We can probably start going with the outline. So let's do that. So we need an outline, right? So what we can do pretty easily for the outline is we can do another remap. I just have to think of the best way to do this. So I think we probably want to do the remap of the previous remap. Okay. Show you what I mean in a sec. And we're going to put like 0.95 here. So it's going to be 0, 1, 0, 0.95. And then we're going to clamp that and floor it. And then we are going to subtract the first one from this other slightly offset one, and that gives us an outline. Pretty cool. So let's register another variable. Okay, let's just call this outline. And we will register a variable for this. We'll call this fill. Perfect. And then for the fill, actually, let's call this opacity. Oh, yeah, my bad. We want to call this opacity, which we already have. We already have that over here. So let's leave that as is. Let's pull that over here just so we know. And what I want to do is the fill isn't actually this node here. The fill is this node minus this node, right? Because in the fill color, we don't want the outline color included. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do another subtract. This might get a little messy here. I'm going to say this node subtract this node. That is going to be our fill. So I'll register another variable, and I will call it fill. And now we have three things here. We have an opacity, which is both together, right? That's essentially this. We have the fill, which is this minus this. And we have the outline, which is just this. So now we can do some things over here. Let's move all of this over. We need more room. So we've got this padding texture. We don't really need this. The only place we're using the padding texture is down here. So we don't need this one over here. So instead of having this going to the emission, what we're going to do is we're going to create some colors. So let's do a color. Property, we'll call this a outline color. Okay, and then we'll make another color. Call this the fill color. Okay, and make sure they're both properties. That way we can change them in the inspector. All right, now we're just going to do some multiplies. 2 multiplies. One of them, we're going to go fill color with a, we're going to get one of these local variables. Which one is it? We're going to get the fill color. Okay, so that's easy. And then the other one, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get the outline color. Okay, so fill color, let's put to something kind of gray, and the outline color we'll put to black. And let's go ahead and add these together. Now the reason we can add these together is because they're masked properly, right? This is separate from this. Sorry, this subtract here is separate from this, and they can go together without touching each other. So we can just add them together. And into the emission, and let's see what happens. And that concludes the first part of our tutorial. In the next part, we will learn how to use custom vertex streams from the particle system and yeah, get this thing looking really good. See you then.